This is Kal Kat, the Kal Katster, and this is a brief review of Star Trek Prodigy Episode 3, Starstruck. The crew of the Protostar, the children who have seized the ship, all of the Cillian Realms characters, right out of the, like before it was Cillian, back to Silly Trek, way back when, like all of Pine Hill. They don't know about Pine Hill, but it's weird because they have Chimerian crystals and Chimera and Protostar and things, that amazing ship that does stuff. A weird coincidence. We're on the same wavelength. Yes. We have the Janeway hologram activates, and it wants to instruct the cadets, in how to fly the ship. The excitable male character with the weird shirt that looks like a wife beater shirt, like that's what they call a white shirt, tank top shirt in a lot of the rural areas. A lot of the areas, and some suburbs where they just call it that, because usually when you see a greasy, slovenly character who's hanging out at Walmart or something, they're wearing like a tank top, and like just a tank top and some jeans. That's called a wife beater. Even though I doubt they are all of them, probably not. Some of them. It's just called that. That's what the shirt's called. This kid's wearing this weird shirt, and it's like, what's the deal with the shirt? Get him a costume or something. The girl though, the girl prisoner is also the father of the Overlord guy. He's an Overlord. He has Chimerian crystals. He's an Overlord. He's got a Narada type spaceship. Which begs the question, why does he want the Federation ship if he's got this gigantic spaceship at the end? He doesn't need it. He's just collecting things just to collect them, like the collector. He's looking for the daughter, but he really didn't want her in the other two episodes. His motivations as a villain are strange. Meanwhile, our heroes are discovering the ship, discover the mess hall. They order up some gross food. They've thrown the girl spy leading in the brig, and then the captain boy sets a course for a exploding white dwarf star binary collision thing. Not realizing that's what it is. The hologram would tell them that's why you don't want to go there, but she didn't. He turned them off too quickly for them to figure that out. Typical of go in where angels fear to tread kind of thing. The Janeway does give a speech about the Federation at one point while they're on their way, mirroring Archer's speech that he didn't say at the end of Enterprise and should have. It's the speech from Enterprise. That's awesome. They put that in there. It's a speech that didn't get put in. So they had Janeway say it. To boldly go where no one's gone before it. No, that kind of thing. So that's the same speech. That's cool that that's in there. It's right out of... they didn't actually do the speech in the episode. There were 2 or 3 versions of the speech on the internet during the Trek web days. About back in 2012 or so, and that's probably where they got one of them. And I wrote one of them, so yes, it wasn't in the script. I just said this is what the speech should be. It was just a blog. It's what it should be. So as Chimera, I wrote. So cool. They included a line from one of my stories in there. We're not realizing that's where they got it. Cool. I didn't write the episode, but the speech, that's a Kal Kat speech. So, definitely. If not, it's a very close copy. Very close. And where no one has gone before is, of course, the catchphrase, but the rest of it, Anyway, so we have, they were thinking like, the Next Generation DS9 Voyager guy. That was there. Yeah. I was in college when Deep Space Nine started. So, actually, I was in college by 89. So, by 89, the middle of Next Generation, early on in Next Generation. Starfleet Academy. Of course, we naturally went to college. And we flew spaceships in our games and stuff, and because we were cadets at that point. Cadets. Never actually served in any military at all, 4F, but in space, in the science fiction story, sure, why not? Anyway, so yeah. So they head to this star thing and inadvertently wreck the power supply. The prisoner gets out because the power goes out on the ship, which would kill them. But it's a cartoon, and they run around to figure out how to turn it back on. And apparently, the prisoner lady wants to build a shuttle. There's a shuttle assembly yard in the bowels of the ship near the deflector dish. The shuttle bay, it's in the deflector dish. But yeah, and the rock girl goes down there to stop her, put her back in the break. She becomes sort of the Trek Yards people just posted, what is Rock Tog? What's her position going to be? They kind of established that in this episode, that she's a security officer. The security officer. Okay, yeah, because she's big and goes around and beats up bad guys. But the bad guy is bad guy girl is actually somewhat sympathetic. She's not necessarily straight up a villain. She's more of an antagonist. The captain kid is kind of an antagonist as well, but in a different way. They're all pirates, basically, on the ship. Sure. And they have to escape from the star thing, and that's what happens. But yeah, so we have a lot of parallels to a lot of other fan stuff out there, not just mine. But yeah, when he said the Chimerian crystal, I laugh at that. Yeah, I said, okay, he's an overlord. All right. That makes sense. Actually, totally makes sense. It looks like the mysterious race of the purple kid is probably with the wife beater shirt. A mysterious race will be discovered to be somewhere in the Alpha Quadrant at some point. And if not, he's a Hirogen or something, possibly. Or some other, maybe they'll find a Borg ship and it'll tell them or something. But Janeway would know, so maybe, she could, if she had the database and all that. There were Kazons that were mentioned in the pilot as well. I don't know where in the Delta Quadrant they are. I didn't know the Kazon had that much reach. They were sort of imitation Klingons on Voyager. They weren't well thought out. They were a little kind of offensive and stereotypical. They were sort of a version of the caveman characters. They sort of like did, instead of making them like the original Romulans were like sneaky Cold War sort of guys, modeled after vaguely the Russians more than the Chinese, and then they switched them as time went on. The Klingons were meant to be more like Chinese. Clearly, in the original Trek, they looked like Sino-Chinese characters. Then they had the mustaches and everything just to be strange. And it didn't quite work, but they did it. And in the movies, they made them look sufficiently different. They were like Vikings. And as Next Generation came around, then they were clearly more like Vikings. And then they sort of took on the Russian role that the Romulans had as toward the end of the Cold War. They took on the role. Which was paramount in Star Trek 6, when they went there and said, yeah, they're supposed to be space Russians, even though they kind of weren't originally. Similar part of the world, but no, they were Chinese, not Russians. But they were supposed to be Russians in that movie, the Chernobyl disaster and all that praxis. The Romulans having their star blow up in the other one made the Romulans more like the Russians again. So basically, any version of other group. I know there was a fan discussion as to what the Federation is. It's the U.S. in space, basically. Yeah, it's less a socialist utopia and more the U.S. in space, because it's primarily the audience. But yeah, it's sort of a U.S. UN thing. Yeah, so yeah, I noticed that all of the original crew characters were all like clearly American sounding, all of them, and then Next Generation there were one or two that weren't, but they were all again same thing. So yeah, and Deep Space Nine was the first one to go and introduce a new group. The Ferengi were earlier. The Ferengi were producers from Hollywood, basically. Another version of America, but producers from Hollywood. And yeah, and contrary to anti-Semitic rumors, they were not Jewish. They were no, they were not. They were modeled after American capitalists. They were supposed to be these capitalist guys. Originally, they were like the capitalist pirate guys, but it didn't work. So they reinvented them. Armin Shimmerman playing Quark, and he and basically it is canon that in the Armin Shimmerman, who happens to be Jewish, actually I think Nimoy was Jewish. The Vulcans were Jewish. Yes, that the Vulcan symbol is Vulcans, which means the Romulans are less. The Romulans should have been less like sneaky Russians and more Palestinians. That would have made sense. The Romulans should be Palestinian. Yeah. But then they invented the Bajorans, and the Bajorans were sort of Palestinians. So they kind of had this weird sort of. It didn't work really. Kind of thing going on. But yeah, so yeah, and Armin Shimmerman had said at the conventions it's canon that he had modeled his character specifically, Quark, after the politician from the 90s, Ross Perot, and the people wrote in the pilot with a line about that in there. And yeah, he did base him on something that was going to be completely dated like a year after it. But that's what they did on Deep Space Nine back in the day. They also had Norm from Cheers on Deep Space Nine. They didn't want to pay the actor for voice stuff, and also pay NBC, another station, because they were early UPN. They didn't want to pay NBC, so Morn, he could have no lines. So Morn would be there all the time. Or Norm would be there all the time, like on Cheers in the 80s. Yeah, that's gonna weather the test of time. Nobody's gonna get it. I told them that at the time. Nobody's gonna get that. 10 years from now, nobody's gonna get that. But that's what it is. It's the guy from Cheers. They just couldn't pay him. They had to pay royalties to NBC. And Quark is Ross Perot. How big ears, capitalist guy running for president. I think he was a centrist billionaire, and that's what they based him on. As for yeah, I'm talking about the Deep Space Nine guys, because the kid looks a little bit like a Ferengi, but I don't think he is. He could be a Talaxian, as some suggest, or a Talaxian mix, which would be interesting. The kid, the show. But yeah, they aren't specifically the people they were playing, they were just portrayed that way. So they weren't directly thinking, yeah, Koloth and Kor from the original Star Trek were literally from China. They weren't thinking that. They were just thinking kind of they were. They weren't thinking the Romulans were literally sneaky Russian guys. They were thinking they kind of were. Yeah, so anyway, or the Vulcan Jews. And Shatner, who had something of that persuasion as well. I didn't say on the show, but yes, he was. But I think they were a different sect, Shatner. Oh, and then yeah. So there's a history lesson about classic Trek and TNG and DS9. Yeah, and they did well to promote they did well to fix it so it wasn't stereotypical. After a while, it kind of worked. Sometimes it didn't. Yeah, you look back at those early episodes and it's kind of embarrassing. But yeah, even some of Star Trek 6 is pretty embarrassing. I'm telling you, now a 30-year-old movie, and you got like okay, why are they constantly quoting Shakespeare in that movie? What's the deal with that? Anyways, all the time, literally, they just went through a Shakespeare book and copied down lines from Shakespeare. Cry havoc and let the dogs of war. A little bit of Henry the Fifth in there. You know, there were a few lines that were from very dated from the 70s, like Spock saying, "Only Nixon could go to China." I mean, yes, only Nixon could go to China. Referring to Kirk going to Nixon going to China from the 70s. So it's just kind of odd. There was Chekhov at one point in the movie references, "Guess who's coming to dinner?" Which is kind of strange coming out of Chekhov. Actually, a lot of the outtakes were kind of strange too, including the Scotty one about there was the B word line with the lady. Klingon keep killed their father. Yeah. There's a lot of other goofy lines in there. The Operation Retrieve scene where Rene Benoit plays an evil admiral colonel who wants to come, Colonel West, who wants to come. Yeah, he was actually in the movie. Before Deep Space Nine. Yeah, so they say. So yeah, the Star Trek 6. So anyway, that was my non-review of an episode of a kids show where they tried desperately not to make them look like any race or group or creed by making them completely alien. It reminds me of the Titan novels. Sure, that works. Probably just as well. They don't look like anything, because then it kind of messed up if suddenly the purple kid was some sort of redneck dude from the South or something. It's all like, "I'm a redneck, yahoo! I got to wear my wife beater shirt. We're gonna go to Walmart now," or something. Anyway, so yeah, slash fiction. No, it's not. No, don't look for it. No,